Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of the Women's Health and Fertility podcast. Today, I have a special guest who is a sister in the fertility community. Her name is Allison Wiesler, and she is a dedicated advocate for infertility awareness, drawing from her own deeply personal journey through. Thank you for joining me today for the Women's Health and Fertility podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Allison Wiesler, who is a sister in the fertility community, and she has dedicated time as an advocate for infertility awareness, drawing from her own deeply personal journey through the challenges of trying to grow her own family. After facing unexpected hurdles on the path to motherhood, Allison became passionate about fostering open conversations around infertility, breaking the silence, and bringing awareness to a disease that affects 1 in 8 couples. She is working hard to give back to a community that understands the emotional, physical, and mental toll of this journey. Now, a proud mother of two IVF girls, Allison continues to share her story to provide hope, encouragement, and a voice for those navigating through similar struggles. Well, welcome, Allison, to the Women's Health and Fertility podcast. I'm so grateful to have you on today and thankful for the work that you've done in our fertility community. I think we first met several years ago through Infertility Unfiltered, and you were a program facilitator for the Journey to Motherhood education series.
Mhm.
And just to give a little background about Infertility Unfiltered, it's an education focused support group that brings women together as a community to support them through their fertility journey, whether it's primary infertility or secondary infertility. And I know there's also an egg donor series as
Yep,
well.
donor
Um,
specialized, yes.
Yes, which is amazing. Their education series includes experts in the fertility field, including reproductive endocrinologists, fertility coaches and specialists,
Mhm.
therapists, and natural medicine providers such as acupuncturists, like
Yes.
myself. And that's where I first had the privilege of meeting you, Allison.
Yeah.
But I just can't thank you enough for being on here. And I know that you have had quite the story yourself in terms of getting to this place of having two beautiful daughters.
Yes,
And I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey and your experiences with becoming a mom.
definitely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So, yeah, my journey, not mine, ours, my husband and I, began in 2017. We'd been married, been together a while. We were ready to keep growing our family, thought this is going to be so easy,
Mhm.
had no signs that it wouldn't be. And after a year, nothing was working, tracking cycles, all of that. So I had my annual exam and was like, hey, what do the next steps look like? Even my doctor's kind of like, I don't know why. I mean, everything is here, right? So let's do the
Mhm.
testing. So the next few months, it took a while because of insurance and all that, but we got our testing and everything came back again. There should be no issues. So we were considered unexplained infertility. I wasn't unfamiliar with infertility. I actually am an IVF baby. So my mom did IVF 30 plus years ago. Clearly, I'm not the first IVF baby, but I was one of the earlier ones.
Yes,
And
for
she had
sure.
severe endometriosis, though. So I
Okay.
did not, thankfully. I do not. And again, I was aware that it is an option for families. So I wasn't opposed to it. I just didn't think that I would be continuing on with the generational use of it. So we, at that point, met with our reproductive endocrinologist and started doing the medications, moving on to IUIs. Still nothing was working. And then we moved on to IVF. And it was at IVF point that I was like, I need more. I can't do
Mm.
this. Infertility is extremely demanding physically, emotionally, and mentally. And
Right.
that's when
Right.
I myself became a participant in Infertility Unfiltered. At that point in time, we were meeting in person, and it was, I will say to this day, one of the best things that I ever did, hands down, was finding that community of people who understood and could comprehend and support me when I had what I felt was irrational emotions to somebody's birth announcement or whatever it might be, that they were like, you're not wrong in being upset about this, right? You can be
Right.
happy for someone and be upset that it's not you yet. So that really helped me process that as we started IVF. And we went through IVF, and like many people, I thought, okay, now we're doing IVF. It's totally going to work. It did not right away. Our first retrieval resulted in two embryos being sent for testing, and neither passed. And I was not prepared for that. I didn't, I guess, even think that was a possibility. And so then when we did another retrieval pretty quickly after, we got one viable embryo that passed, and we transferred that embryo, and unfortunately found out on Thanksgiving Day, about ready to host a bunch of people, that it did not work.
Hmm.
So that took a lot of time to process. And as you're familiar with, when you're going through all these hormones, it really impacted my body. So we took a next few months off just financially, and I needed the break for my body. And in hindsight, I now realize it was also mental. I really needed that. And that break was good for me. It allowed me to see that I could go back to feeling like myself when I wasn't impacted so heavily by all these treatments. So we said, okay, we'll do one more because I'm third round of IVF. So let's do one more. And we did our retrieval the week before COVID shut everything down,
Oh,
thankfully.
goodness.
I know we made it just in time, but then we did get paused. So we could not do our transfer like we were expecting. We took that opportunity to do some additional testing, doing the ERA testing, and I think that was really beneficial. So finally in July, we were able to do our transfer, and thankfully that one did work. And we ended up having our first daughter early. She did her own
Yay.
timeline and came
Of course.
10 weeks
Of
early, which
course.
in itself was a whole other ball game. Now I experienced infertility, and now I was a NICU mom, but she is thriving and came home, and we said, great, our family looks amazing. And I can definitely, looking back, see where the anxiety, not only of a traumatic birth, but a traumatic getting pregnant. And it was an okay pregnancy. It wasn't a great, it
Mhm.
wasn't bad, but I think the benefit of that was it was COVID. So I was home. So I wasn't dealing with like moving around a lot, weird smells, anything. But I got rid of a lot of stuff right away because in my mind, I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't know what it was going to look like for our family, and we didn't have any more embryos. So if we decided to do this, I was more towards adoption. So then, I guess my daughter turned 2, and we were kind of like, she's pretty great. We could probably do this again.
Sure.
So we were looking into it, and I work for a UC system, and they offer some coverage, 50%. So we're like, oh, okay, well, we know that option, and they do help fund families going through adoption, but cost wise, it wasn't as impactful as it would going through IVF. So we decided we know that beast, right? We know what to expect with it. So let's
Right.
go with that option.
Mhm.
And
And so
decided
helpful to have coverage,
it is
that's
super helpful.
mhm.
In the end, it wasn't quite as much as they actually say, which is a whole other beast that I am trying to start tackling. They did change their verbiage now on what it covers because I think they realize they're not fully coverage. And I don't know if we would have, knowing how much we'd pay out of pocket again.
Sure.
Uh, so yeah, we decided to do it again and ended up getting two embryos this time, even though I was older. And I attribute a lot of that to what you and I have talked about. I was more intentional with the vitamins and the
Mhm.
medications that I was taking, doing the acupuncture earlier, not just during the transfer
Sure.
cycles, taking more care of my body physically, emotionally, mentally, all of it across the board versus just like go, 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 like I had been in 2019 and 2020. Unfortunately, that first transfer again didn't work. Uh,
Mhm.
Day of transfer, we found out it was I'd say, weaker embryo. So in my heart, I am saying it was because the embryo, not that we did anything wrong. And it helped me move on. And that was working with a infertility life coach actually really helped me be able to process that and know that I did everything that I could with the knowledge that I had at the time to move forward with the transfer and everything like that. So we took another break, And I had a big wedding that I was in Italy. So we were like, well, let's go enjoy that.
Yes,
I
yes.
did the liver detox that you
Mhm,
are always
mhm.
recommending, and it just helped flush my body from Italy's wonderful wine, as well as flushing
Food,
everything out before we did the next transfer.
right.
And that transfer did work. And that little girl thankfully decided to be on time. But so yeah, now we have two girls and
Oh,
fully done. No other embryos. Of course, people always ask because that's society, right? Like, oh, are you gonna go for a boy? No,
right.
these ones are really expensive and we don't feel that we need it. But
Oh,
we're
well,
happy with what we have.
congratulations. You have such a beautiful family,
Thank
Allison, and
you.
2 amazing daughters. Like, what a
Yes.
blessing.
Yep.
So, having gone through 2 kind of different IVF
Mhm.
cycles, I have a question. How much do you think the stress impacted these cycles for you?
I would definitely say absolutely. It's a huge impact. I think, especially the first time, right? The
Mm,
sibling cycle, the stress was there. I knew what to expect. It was harder in a way because the first cycles up until COVID, my husband came to every appointment. And I'm very thankful for that. That was something
mm,
that we agreed on from the beginning. I said, this isn't just me going through it. Like, normal couples have to do this together. We are doing this together just somewhere else. And he was there, even though he's not the morning person. He was there every morning at those 6:30, 6:45 a.m. appointments. Obviously, that couldn't apply when we were doing our sibling cycle. Someone had to be with our daughter. But because I knew what to expect, it wasn't quite as bad. I also felt being very open with my daughter. We're trying for a sibling. Mommy has to have shots. She's going to have extra doctor's appointments. And I remember a couple people being like, why are you telling her? Because
mm,
at that point, she was 2. And I said, well, she's not going to remember it if it doesn't work out. But at least right now, she has understanding as to why I'm not here or why I can say, I can't hold you. Because, like, when you have your
yes,
retrieval,
that's right.
right, you
Yeah.
can't hold them, or when you do a transfer. And
Mhm.
so, all of that, because I had the experience of having done this, the sibling cycle was a little easier. And I already had her. So, if it didn't
Right,
work, as
right.
hard as that would be, I had one. On the front end, though, getting to our first daughter, extremely hard. The stress of it, it's such an emotional roller coaster. You're putting all your energy into this. You're trying to juggle your work, your life, and figuring out these appointments. And it's so unpredictable based on your cycle and how everything is responding. You can't plan anything in advance. Like, I was thinking as we were getting ready to talk and how we went from the IUIs, and then the doctor's like, okay, are we going right into IVF? And I was like, no, I would like to, but there's a family wedding and it's going to be out of town. So that's going to be too
Mhm.
hard. And of course, if I'm planning this right, the retrieval is going to be. And so you're just trying to
Yes.
juggle all these extra
Yeah,
things.
right. I call it a moving
And
target. It's
you
like
go in, yeah,
yeah.
you're like, okay, here's what we got to do. And we're going to do this on this date and this on
Mhm.
this date. And then you're fully focused. And you're like, I am positive. I am in the zone. And then it doesn't work. And you're like, oh, screw everything. And this doesn't work. And so it's
Yeah.
such an emotional roller coaster, and the stress of like, what should I do differently? And, even down to so because of COVID, my husband wasn't actually in the room when we transferred our first daughter.
Mhm.
It's a joke between us that he wasn't even in the room, but it really unsuspectingly came back. And when we were doing our first transfer for the sibling cycle, I didn't know if I wanted him in the room. What if he jinxed it?
I know there's always that sort of
Yeah.
superstition of we need to keep everything the same.
Right. We knew
Exactly how I
one
did
time
it
he
the
was in the
first
room, it
time.
didn't work. And the other time he wasn't in the room, it worked. So was it that he wasn't in the room, or was it that I did the acupuncture in the room instead of just like going to my acupuncturist off site like I did?
Sure.
What
Mhm.
was it? What was that perfect combination of everything? And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's those things that you're playing with that add more stress on top of everything else that you're trying to find the perfect combination.
Right, right. And I would imagine too, going through treatment during COVID in itself is stressful.
Hmm.
Just all of the rules and regulations around masking and vaccines, and there was just so much going on at that time. And wow,
Yeah.
and I love that your daughter was like, "I'm coming Earthside."
Yeah.
No matter what, I'm
I know.
here.
I always joke with people. I was like, well, she must have heard me say so often that we've waited so long for her. Right. So I'd
Mm.
always be like, oh, we've waited so long. I can't wait to meet you. She's like, all right, sure. You want to meet me? And just came early. And I was like, well, that's not what I meant, but thank you.
Yes, here I am.
Yes, exactly.
Well, so tell me how the infertility unfiltered support group helped you through some of the stressful times.
Yeah.
Sounds like you had started that for
Hmm.
the first cycle, correct?
Yes. Yes. So I was, again, I would say that low point as it's like the IUIs haven't worked. We have no reason why, right? All the testing is showing everything is normal. I respond well to the medications and getting ready to go into the IVF. And I remember telling someone very close to me, we were going to start IVF, and they said, oh, I'm glad you're doing something about it. I'm like, what? What do you think the past 6 months have been trying to do regular Clomid for a couple months, IUI on Clomid, IUI on injections? And I was like, that's no, I've been doing things, but to so much of the outside community, people who have no understanding of infertility, the key word is IVF, not that
Right,
there's all these other steps. We just
right.
think, oh, we're not pregnant, so we're going right to IVF. Not all the months
Mhm.
of testing,
Sure.
not all
There's
the months of trying all these other treatments before.
so much
And
in
so,
between. In
yeah,
between natural
there's not
fertility
a
and
T.
IVF.
Yeah,
Yes, for sure.
exactly. So I was like, I'm gonna need a little bit more support on
Mhm,
this. And I was on Instagram, and they had posted, I probably was looking up hashtag infertility, and they posted about their first group who was going through right at that time. And I thought, you know what? That sounds just like what I need. And thankfully they were here in Orange County. And so I signed up, and like I said, it is one of the best things I did. I think there was about 12 of us, and we met in
nice.
person every week. And
Mhm,
as you said, we had experts coming in, and it was just a range of topics from dealing with friends and family
mhm.
to having your relationship, because it does impact your marital relationship and your partner. And, on a heterosexual relationship, it really impacts what's going on, because trying to make a baby should be fun. And it's not when you add in all these other elements. And that really impacts. And obviously, the financial is a big impact. And so there's a discrepancy on couples on how far they're willing to go with this. And, sometimes the couple doesn't want to keep spending money. Reasonable, completely reasonable. And someone else is really set on this. So, where do you find that compromise? So, having someone to talk through that, or just being able to talk about the grief that comes with this, and how that looks, and what does that mean, and those words. And like I said, you go get a text message and someone announces they're pregnant, and gosh, you're so excited for them and you want to
Yes.
be
Mhm,
happy for them. But
mhm,
it's like that rusty spoon to you, gutting you, and you're just like, why can't I have that? And so then
mm.
you go through this cycle of like, I'm mad at myself for feeling that way, even though I'm completely valid. So that's where the support group really provided, I don't want to say talking me off that ledge, but in a way. So I didn't go in that emotional roller coaster.
Right, right.
That I had people who understood, and they're like, yeah, that is frustrating. You're
Yeah. It's
absolutely right.
valid
Mhm.
feelings for sure.
Exactly. And so it's
Mhm.
validating, right? And you're like, wow, okay. Or going to a Mother's Day thing and someone saying, happy, oh, not Mother's Day to you.
Oh,
And
that's
you're just
tough.
like,
That's a tough one. Sure.
thanks.
Yeah.
And I have a dog. She's fantastic. I
Mhm,
had a dog, unfortunately, she passed.
mhm,
But I'm a
mm.
I'm a dog mom, so I can still get acknowledgement. And I also just think having people who not only understand everything, but it gives you a safe space to talk through it, because not everybody has that. And one of the reasons I'm so open about our journey is I have the hope that if I can be open about it, somebody else who's out there who can't be at least knows they're not alone and they have
Yes.
someone in their corner. So
Amen.
whether that means they can't talk to their family
Mhm.
due to judgments,
Right.
misunderstanding, whatever it is, I can educate one person to maybe pause and think what they say. Maybe they don't say, do you have any kids? When are you having another one? When are you going to have one? they pause and think, oh, wow, I remember Allison talking about this. That helps. And then if somebody out there is going through this, but they don't feel comfortable telling, they think, I know I'm not alone. And that's what the support groups provide in an immediate without having to search for it. We had that and it was fantastic. So I could send a quick text and be like, I'm having a really hard day today. The, embryos came back and none of them worked and they get it.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
rally behind you and they get it. And so that was, like I said, one of the best things that I've ever done. And we actually just saw one of the couples. She was in the support group and we both were like, oh, we live in this area. And we were like, oh, I'm between these streets. Yeah, same with I. Okay, well, then when you exit, I turn on this street. So do I. And we realized we were actually on the same street
Wow.
and we were
What a
5 houses from
coincidence.
each other. It was completely, and we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they were a couple who they were one of our COVID partners because they lived down the street. They were going to be doing their
Mhm.
IVF, so they didn't want to be around a lot of people. So we knew they were
Sure.
taking the same precautions. And thankfully, their transfer worked, and their daughter is 5 months younger than ours. But
Oh, I
it's like,
love that.
we've been able to do that whole journey with them. And they actually have one more embryo and they're really undecided on it. But they're like, okay, so we were able to see like how you've done it. And so it's still nice to be able to have that with them.
For sure. And I think that, that I've been part of a couple of the education series, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been really just cool seeing the type of community and the support that comes out of the group. And what I noticed about the group of women in each series is that they lean on each other for advice on a lot of things,
Yes,
also like what's the protocol your doctor's using?
correct.
Because the women are from everywhere. Now that it's a virtual support group,
Yes,
they can be from out of country, out of state, and it's great to be able to pick other people's brains about like, so when did you decide to try IVF? Like how many IUI
yes,
cycles did you go through?
yes,
And what was the protocol that your doctor put you on? So I thought that that was such a helpful resource for women to be able to
absolutely.
compare notes about supplements you're taking. So,
Well, and even right, like you're saying, the terminology.
mhm,
Oh, my doctor mentioned this, but of course you're there and you're just like, what? Yeah, 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 as they tell you everything. And then you go home and you process and you're like, well, I don't know. And so then someone in the group may be like, oh, well, we did an ERA.
yes. And you're like, what's an ERA?
What's an ERA? And they actually weren't even around when we did our first transfer.
Mhm, mhm.
And even by then, they were becoming more popular and things like that. And so it was like, oh, okay, so this is something new.
Something to
Or
ask
it was the
about.
Emma and Alice test. That's was it went
And
around when all women did
Receptiva.
our first
Yes,
test.
yes.
So we did the ERA before our successful transfer, but the Emma and Alice, when I became a facilitator, and people were like, Emma and Alice, like, Emma and Alice, what is this? Like, and I had
Mhm.
to look it up. And then I was like, oh, okay. But it gives you that confidence to go back to your doctor and say, hey, I have a friend, their clinic is doing this. Do you think I'm a good candidate for it? And that's how I always like to tell them when I was a facilitator. I say, don't say, why aren't we doing this? Say, am I a good candidate for it? Because maybe they don't feel you are because we know you have X.
Right,
And that's not
right.
the issue, right? So it's
Mhm.
not going to be beneficial. Maybe you have the
Sure.
administrator in reserve and it's not the attaching, it's the egg, is whatever it might be.
Right.
So I think having that group and that terminology, and that's one reason that I always say any friends like going through it. I have a friend going through an egg retrieval right now. And so she's like, oh, I'm taking this medication. Okay, I didn't take that one. Here's what I know other people have had. Here's where you may have some reactions. You may want to have an ice pack ready. And so, of course, the first day she's like, oh, wasn't that bad? She's like, okay, I feel it now. I get why
Yes.
ice pack. It's starting to burn a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Right, right. So helpful to have these tricks and tips from other women that have gone through it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the stimulation phase or the FET phase, the
Yeah.
medications can be tough for sure.
It is. I mean, and everyone reacts differently too, right?
Right,
So,
right.
and that's the great thing. And I know this is Victoria started Infertility Unfiltered because she was a new mom and she was attending a program for new moms to have that support, right? We generally understand that concept for women who are new moms. Like it's overwhelming. And so she said, well, where is this for infertility? And it's true
Mhm.
because it is such a vast unknown and there are so many things in so many situations. So to have somebody else say, yes, I did this or I took these, I believe that the CoQ10 made a huge difference for me in
Mhm.
terms of my embryo success, especially in the fact that our 2019s, we only had one embryo pass on two of them. Here I am older, right, by 4 years or so, and we had two embryos pass this time. So it
And
wouldn't
that
normally
was one of
be
the
that way.
difference was that you had incorporated more supplements, including
I
coconut.
think so.
Okay.
And I went into it, right, with that mindset of like, okay, I know what to expect now. I'm not going back to back to back. That was another thing. My body had had
Sure.
a rest. I mean, between our November transfer and our COVID retrieval, not even transfer, but I'd taken 3 months off. My
Mhm.
body had had the time to rest. Whereas
Sure.
previously, I was one of those people that I was go, 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 go. I was not good about taking the breaks. I did that much better on the sibling cycle. And I know there are people who are really good with that, but that's also another internal struggle that you deal with is that's another month.
Right.
Okay, if I
Well,
take this
let's
break,
talk a little bit about that, Allison, because I think you bring up a really important point that I call it the IVF bullet train. You
yes.
know, you're on the train, it's going super fast, and everyone's afraid to get off.
Mhm.
And when, like you said, when you're going through treatments, a lot of times your RE might say, that's okay, we'll just go back to back to back and
Yep.
do a couple of stim cycles. And it sounds like you're kind of on the same page as me. I encourage patients to take a break.
Mhm.
That's not just for physical reasons, but mental, emotional,
Yes.
just to recoup, regroup. Would you be able to talk a little bit about that and how
Yeah,
it impacted you when you decided to take some time off?
definitely. Like I said, I was not of the mentality of taking a break. To me, a break was lost time. I
Mm,
was
mhm.
already losing time, right?
Right.
All these unsuccessful treatments. So, like, let's get going on to the next thing. And I work events. Like, I'm used to one event ends, you go to the next one, you go to the next one, you go to the next one. I used to do corporate events. You were never, it was always go, go. So, that is just naturally what I do. So, it is harder for me anyway to slow down. And with this, every time that I was taking a break, it was lost time. Like I said, once I finally was forced to, after unsuccessful transfer, my body is one that the estrogen stays in, and I get that first immediate cycle, but then I don't for about 2 months.
Okay. Yeah.
And it forced me to slow down. And that's when I thought, oh, one, wow, I feel like my normal self. Because when I was on the bullet train going cycle after cycle after cycle, I would normally consider myself pretty extroverted. And
Uh-huh.
I was not because it's hard to go out and meet people when you're going through these, right? One, you're juggling all of the schedule. When are you going to have time to do that? And two, what are the first questions that people always ask when you meet someone? Are you married? Do you have kids?
Right. Right.
I don't want to answer that. And so I was becoming much more introverted, which is not wrong in any capacity. It just wasn't me. And I felt that I wasn't me. And that was something I was struggling with. So when we were forced to take that break because of my body needing the time, I was like, oh, wow, I actually feel more like myself. And I think that's what I needed going into that
Mm.
last retrieval. And also knowing for us, that was the end. And I think that is a hard discussion for any couple is where is that end point for you? And I remember someone asking me, and I said, for us, I knew that maybe really I didn't want to do the third, but my husband wasn't quite done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay. And obviously, like I said, my mom did three. Back then, it was you just take the eggs out, you put them in, you put them right back in. And so hers were pretty quick back to back. And said, okay, well, if she had three, like maybe that will be our lucky one. And thankfully it was.
Yes.
But I also had said, like, I will do this many and then we need to stop and really reevaluate. And we had attended an info session on adoption. So we knew what we would go into when we were ready if we were going to go that route. And, it's an amazing option for people. And I think it's so easy for people outside of any knowledge of it to say, well, why don't you just adopt? Right. When you talk about starting infertility and they
Mm.
don't realize it's not an easy cut and dry, just like going IVF. It's not an easy, like, yep, I'm ready for adoption. Please hand me a baby. And then you have one. Like it's not. And so that was going to be its own hurdle if we went that route. And we just had to mentally get there after closing this chapter for us. Um,
Right. Right.
so taking those breaks were a big benefit, but it was very hard for me to see it at the time. It was
Yes. But
not,
now
I
you
was
can
so
have, yeah, now you have like the 2020 hindsight that you can say
yes,
that was the right choice for me. And I'm
yes.
so glad that I did that. And
Yes, so
I think,
going into it for the sibling cycle, I could look back and say, "Wow, having that break between the unsuccessful transfer
mm-hmm,
and the successful one really benefited me, so don't be opposed to it." And
sure.
so we had the retrieval and thankfully 2, and then we did the Emma Alice and ERA testing because it could have changed, and it did. My results had changed in a few years. And then we did the transfer. Unfortunately, it didn't work. And my doctor was like, okay, so are we doing this again? And I said, no, I can't do it. I need the break, partially because I had learned I do need it for my body, for my mental. Also, because I knew I didn't want to rush and be stressed because the timing of it would have been at an inconvenient time for me with work and then the wedding in Italy. And I didn't want that in the back of my mind. I wanted to say, let me focus on these things and then I can focus on that. And I needed that separation. But again, right, older and wiser, I could do that. Now, if this had been my first time, I probably would have rushed it. I don't
Sure.
know. But
Sure.
I was able to say, we've been here, we've been down this road. Let's take the break. And that I think is really when I came to you and I was like, all right, this is it. We're going all out. Let's do everything.
Right. I love that you came to me for that. And I felt like it was divine timing that we
Mm-hmm.
came together. And so I just, I really appreciate you trusting us with your care,
Yeah.
Allison. And I know that you weren't new to acupuncture. Um,
Correct.
so you had been doing acupuncture for both cycles, right?
Yes, so I had done
Mhm.
it early on, and I love the acupuncturist. I think she was great. Um, and then the retrieval one for the sibling cycle. I mean, I did the I'll find someone who insurance covers, and I did specifically look up someone who had infertility experience, and she was lovely. Like clearly, I got 2 embryos. I mean, it worked, right? It helped me
Sure.
relax and get
Yes,
situated.
definitely.
But like we said, when that time came, I was like, all right, I am going all out. Like, let's do all of it. And I'd been working with you. And I told my husband, I was like, we're doing this. Like, I'm going all out. And he's like, okay, whatever. I was like, I don't want to walk away from this being like, should we have done this? Should I have done that? Well, did we? And I could walk away confidently and be like, I did everything. I did everything in my control. I used all the resources available to me. I can walk away knowing one way or another, I've done my best,
Yes, I love
right?
that
Leaving it all
because
on the field.
that's right. I love that you knew that and you're like, this is not, I don't want to leave one stone unturned. Like this is
Mhm.
like we're gonna, and your openness to everything
Yes.
and all the different modalities beyond acupuncture, because I know that you've had several sessions of some energy medicine and cranial
Mhm.
sacral therapy and Reiki.
Yes.
And so I think that there's the saying in Chinese medicine, or I've kind of taken the saying in Chinese medicine and adapted it in my own version. But the saying is that an open heart leads to an open uterus or an open womb.
Nice.
So,
And that's perfect. Yeah.
yeah, working on your heart chakra and keeping that heart open for love and joy. So, enjoying, going back to the things that you enjoy is so important because I think that when you're going through fertility treatments, it's so easy to get paralyzed in that
Yes.
process, and you're so focused on all the treatments, I mean, it's like a part-time job, you
It
are.
is. It really is. I mean, I was talking to my girlfriend who's doing her acupuncture. She's like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm trying to find where the best, cheapest place to get my medication is. I was like, honestly, props to you because I never once did that. I was like, where do I order my medicine? I just want it simple. Right? And
Yes.
I have that privilege that we
Hmm.
could pay for this, but it is so like, you can add so many layers to it.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that being really mindful and aware of your body and aware of when you need to take a break, aware when you need that support, whether it's a support group or time with
Yep.
girlfriends, a therapist, I
Hmm.
think that is so key in having a successful fertility journey and starting and growing your family. And so I always encourage patients like go back and do something you love. Like when's the last
Yes.
time were able to laugh out loud and watch a comedy or go back to doing the artwork that you love to do or sing or dance. It's
Yeah,
so
just something
important.
that brings your heart joy because it's so easy to get. And that's like when we talk about taking breaks, right? I remember talking to one of the women who, when I was a facilitator, we had started communicating outside of it. And she's like, oh, I don't know if I want to go on this trip to New York and attend a concert. I was like, do it. Like,
Yeah,
unless you absolutely feel that it's not going to be the best for you, I would recommend it. And I said, because it's going to be a good break for you. It gets you out of the churn and burn grind of doing your
yes.
treatments. And also, willing everything works, you won't be able to do that taping,
Right.
right? So, like,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
and do it. And she
Mm,
did. And then thankfully, a few months later, they did their transfer and it worked. But we can get so
awesome.
caught up in that, like, oh, I don't know. Should I again? Like,
Yeah,
who should I
that
visit? It's like,
extra careful
you
that
have
like,
to
is this going to be
sometimes.
the one thing that's going to impact my success?
Hmm.
And I think that women going through IVF, there's so many no's, there's
Yes.
so many like, be careful of this, you can't do this, that it's so
Hmm.
nice to be able to get a yes.
Yes,
And
correct. It really is.
right?
Right? You're trying to be careful on like medications and your exercise and what you're
Mm,
eating. And so it's like,
mhm.
let me just take this night and just like any diet, right? I think you're always saying like it's a good balance of like
80/20
80% of,
rule.
yeah, like it
Yes.
doesn't have to be 100%
Right.
perfection because you're already trying to do everything like that. So like enjoy some
For
of the
sure.
things.
Yes, because the last thing we want is for you to feel more stress over
Correct.
over a diet or over food or what you're eating on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm. Like we
So
know stress doesn't cause infertility. Thank you to everyone who says, have you just tried relaxing? We know that's not it,
Allison.
but let's set up the environment to help you not have the
Abs
additional stress.
absolutely. Can we take one more thing off your plate where you
Yes.
can just be follow a program, just know I always tell patients 80/20 rule on diet. You have a weekday diet, which is the 80%, and then you have the weekend diet, which will make up your 20%.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's completely antisocial if you're
And like for
following
me,
this
it
strict
was like,
diet.
okay, we're doing these good meals, and I absolutely am having dessert afterwards. Like I'm a dessert
Yeah.
person. So yes,
Yes.
give me my dessert.
I'm so glad that you let yourself indulge in things like that. And
Mhm.
those are the kind of things that warm our hearts, allow us to keep our heart open and still have those little pearls of joy in our life that we can hold on to while we're going through some challenging times.
Absolutely.
Allison, thank you for sharing your story.
Of
And
course.
you're such an incredible contributor to the community, the fertility community. And I've sat through many groups that you have facilitated. I have a couple more questions. If you were to give advice to someone that's kind of coming new into their fertility journey, or perhaps just starting that IVF
Mhm.
process, what would you share with these folks?
So what I usually share, right, when someone comes to me, I ask them in terms of what are you doing as you start talking to your doctor, right? What are the vitamins you're taking? What are you doing to have some of your ownership of this? Because so much of it is out of our control. And I usually say, here's the vitamins, that you and I have talked about. Here's ones that I took that benefited me, like the CoQ10, having a prenatal, just getting going. So I talk through that kind of stuff because their doctor is going to talk to them about it, right? So it's like, okay, here's what I've had. What did they already talk to you about? Here's what I'm doing. And then in terms of just like the emotional side of it, I do say, find your group. Whether if you, I'm happy to be that person. I've been connected to a bunch of amazing women because of somebody that I know, and they say, hey, I have so and so told me that they're going to go through IVF. Would you be okay if they ask you any questions? Absolutely, because I know
Mm,
how overwhelming it is. Like, please send them to me. And so, again, is there anyone that you can reach out to have these questions answered that maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to the doctor, or like we said, I've heard of this, they recommended this, what have you heard? And then if you can take it that next step, doing a support group, Infertility Unfiltered, Resolve, the National Infertility Awareness Organization has some great support groups that doing that, if that works for you. Because you need support. And even if you don't feel comfortable telling your family, you need, as we've said plenty of times, we need the people who get it. And if you need that extra step, one
Mm.
more, if it's finding a therapist, I did a therapist a little bit on the front end with our first ones. To me, I was very like, has to be someone who understands infertility. And that was hard navigating and finding a therapist. I found someone who had experienced miscarriages, which I had not, but at least I felt like she kind of understood the pain and the loss.
Sure.
And that helped processing a couple of times.
Mhm.
And then this next round, when we did the sibling cycle, I knew I needed more. And I was in a unique situation that it wasn't secondary infertility because we'd already gone through infertility. It wasn't our first time of infertility, but we didn't have embryos. And a lot of people, when they go through infertility and go through IVF, are very fortunate and get multiple embryos. And so sometimes when they go to have another sibling, they're there for them and they can not have to completely start over. We were starting over, like we had to go to insurance to do the whole testing. And so I was like, I need that extra support because it's kind of a weird offshoot of this. And so I went and found an infertility coach, Kristen, and she was fantastic and absolutely amazing and just what I needed to talk through it because she has been through infertility and has been
Mhm.
through IVF and had one that it didn't work, one that resulted in a miscarriage, and one that had her daughter. And so it was so comforting, again, having someone who understood,
Right.
right?
Right.
That's what I needed mentally. So setting up those systems as you're starting your treatments, the medical side of it, are you taking the vitamins that you need to be successful? And then what are the services that you can find to support you? Support groups, friends. If you have supportive friends, maybe you don't need to find a support group. I had some friends who came out of the woodwork and life changing. Like they were already some of my best friends, but they really knocked it out of the park. One lives on the other side of the country, and every 2 weeks I'd get a postcard, and every retrieval day she'd send me flowers.
Oh, I love
And
that.
so it was like, that's what I needed. Like, she wasn't asking the questions, but she was there and I knew she would be. So finding those supports, whether that's you have it or going outside and building it, that's
Mhm.
okay. And
Mhm.
then what are the other things that you can do that are in your control? Attending acupuncture, getting massages. I tried a Mayan massage one time. I was like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. Right. It was
Love that.
interesting.
Yes.
I would be open to doing it even now postpartum because I think it'd be really
Hmm.
interesting. But I was willing to try it. And sometimes you have to suspend what you would normally think is your reality and be like, I'm giving it my all. And maybe you're not ready to do that the first few times, and that's okay. But as you progress, like, why not? What do I have to lose?
Yes, you're kind of like this ever evolving being, right? As
Yeah.
you transition into motherhood, I think that, we go through different phases that we're willing and open to try different things. So, but thank you so much for sharing that
Yeah.
information and your wisdom and advice around fertility and becoming a mom. And if it's okay, Allison,
Mhm.
since I know that you mentioned you are a resource for a lot of women that are on this path,
Mhm.
I would love to share your Instagram if that's okay in the
Absolutely.
show notes. So if anybody has questions or they want to reach out, I know you're taking a pause right now from being a facilitator.
Yes.
It's Infertility Unfiltered, but I'm definitely going to include information on Infertility Unfiltered.
Yes. Yeah. And they've redone their structure. It's a little
Hmm.
bit shorter of a program. I think it's fantastic. My husband and I actually, a sorority sister from college is starting her IVF, and we sponsored her to
Oh,
attend
so
the
nice.
treatment. And we did another one for them to raffle off. So that's something that we try to give back at the end of the year because, again, we have the means to be able to do that. And it was so beneficial to us for us to be able to have me attend that. And I think that's something else too, is couples go through this, is infertility really makes you dig deep on your communication with your partner. And as I've said a few times, joining the group is one of the best things. And my relationship, my communication with my husband was the other thing that amazingly was so beneficial from my from infertility. And because we were the only ones doing it. And while I have parents who understood it, we were the ones going through it now. And it's
Sure.
drastically different than it was almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so having my husband be able to, we really had to sit down and talk. And I had to say, you got to talk to these people. And so
Do you
he's
feel like
very
it
open
brought
about it
brought it
too.
do you believe that it brought you 2 closer together as a
Yes.
result? I feel like
Yeah.
it could go either way, if you have a solid
Absolutely, and that's the
foundation.
hard part with it, right? It could go either
Mhm.
way, and that was an amazing thing. I remember that was one of the most eye-opening sessions when I was in the support group, and seeing how the different couples, and the couples weren't there, but how we each talked about our experience with our husband. And you see the same thing when people do have kids. And like I said, trying to find where's that end point for you as a couple, because you could be at totally different points, right? My husband was willing to do more, I didn't maybe want to. And so trying to find that balance of like what worked for us as the couple. And I think trying to figure out financially, emotionally, like what does that future look like? And for
Right,
some
right.
people, maybe they're more open to being child free by choice.
Mhm.
And some people want to explore every avenue. So maybe they do a couple of treatments, whatever's within their budget or coverage by insurance. Then maybe they want to go on to adoption, and that can look different, but you have to be able and have those hard conversations. And I think that's what's so surprising, I wasn't prepared for, is how many of those hard conversations we had. And also filling out the paperwork. We had to fill out what happens to our embryos if one of us passes away, if we divorce. And those are not conversations I ever thought I'd have. And so that was really eye opening, and having to my husband being able to read me better, right? Because I'll be fine. And then someone makes a comment and it just catches me off guard. And he steps in to have like take over the conversation for me.
Right, right. Well, I'm so glad that you and your husband grew stronger from this process and that you guys decided to move forward with another transfer.
Yes.
I'm just so excited for the both of you.
Yep.
And Allison, is there any other last words you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
I mean, I'm so appreciative of everything you and the other women at your clinic. I mean, I think I worked with almost everybody there at
Yes, I
this
think you
point.
have.
I'm an acupuncturist and working with the chiropractic. I think and just everyone's amazing. You guys create such a supportive environment. And I think, and this is what I always tell people, for me, acupuncture, it really helped me take the stress off. It helped me slow down, even if it was for the hour and a half,
Mm,
and stop and relax. And inevitably, I would fall asleep every time because I was go, 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 and the medications throw you off. And so I think there's definitely, you know, as you said, there's different moving goalposts based on everyone where they're at in their treatments and where they're at in that cycle and how far they want to go. And your team is great about being like, okay, let's get your feet wet with it. Let's try acupuncture. Okay, we're ready to add a little bit more. Like, how about some of these vitamins? Oh, do you want to add more with Reiki or the crystals? And so you guys do a great job of helping people find their comfort zone, and when they're ready, pushing them out of it to try something
oh, thank you so much. And you're very
new.
easy to support and treat. You
Yeah.
are like an ideal patient, Allison. So we appreciate you so much. And again, thank you for your time and your dedication and devotion to the
Of
fertility
course.
community.
Yeah. Like I said, if I can make one person not feel alone, then that's the best that I can ask for. And if I can make one person who thankfully doesn't have to experience infertility, but pause and think and slow down, maybe asking instead of saying, do you have any kids? Tell me about your family. Then that's a success. We have taken our story, and have helped somebody.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And the awareness, I mean, building that awareness around infertility or just fertility challenges, I think is
Mhm.
huge.
Yes.
So you're amazing. Thank you,
Thank
Allison.
you.